Good morning. Thank you.
So what did you find out just on the big question about this?
Well, I spoke to Sarah Wilkins-Laflamme. She's a professor of sociology at the University of Waterloo, and she studies the impact of religion on Canadian society. And based on her research, she says that religion plays a more important role in voting than we usually think. It's something that's not easily seen here as it is in the U.S. And she says it's as important as other factors such as age, gender, employment status, and education. It's a stronger role than many people think.
Can you give us some examples of how religion might affect voting?
Well, sure. And for that, we need to turn to the 2021 Canadian election study by Statistics Canada. And according to what Sarah found in the study, the more religious Canadians are, the more they go to services, that is, the more they tend to vote Conservative. And the less religious they are, the less they go to church or any other place of worship, the more they lean towards the NDP, with some exceptions for mainline Protestants and Catholics. The study found that 33% of people who attend services once a month or more voted Conservative, while 28% voted Liberal and 14% voted NDP. 2% voted Green and 5% cast a vote for the People's Party. Of those who attended only once a year, or so, the results are much closer. 29% voted Conservative, 28% Liberal, 17% NDP. But it's when you get to the people who don't go to church or other places of worship at all that you begin to see the bigger differences. And that's when you find out that the NDP is in the lead with 26% of voters, followed by the Liberals at 23%, and the Conservatives fall to 18%.
So at least according to these statistics, going to church or other places of worship can be equated with voting Conservative.
Exactly. And that's the most important thing for evangelicals. The study found that 38% of Baptists voted Conservative, as did 41% of Pentecostals, 39% of Christian Reformed, and 43% of those who go to non-denominational churches like Springs or Church of the Rock here in Winnipeg. But the most important thing to note here in Canada is that while evangelicals tend to vote Conservative, many others vote for other parties too, like the Liberals or the NDP. In other words, Canadian evangelicals aren't like evangelicals in the United States. In that country, 80% of them voted for Donald Trump in the last election. But here in Canada, evangelicals are not nearly as uniform.
What about those who are not religious? What was the significance there when you looked at the data?
That's very significant now and into the future. 35% of Canadians today say they have no religious affiliation. They are the nones, N-O-N-E-S. When asked about the religious affiliation, they say they have none. That's up from 16% in 2001, and those people tend not to vote Conservative. And the reason that's important in Canada is because as that group increases in size and the group of traditional religious people decreases, it's going to have an impact on Conservative voting in this country, and it might be of benefit to the Liberals, the NDP, and the Greens.
So, John, you mentioned exceptions for mainline Protestants. What is happening there?
The study found that the more Anglicans and United Church members go to religious services, the more they tend to vote Liberal or NDP. And the less they go to services, the more they vote Conservative. And the same is true for Catholics.
Why do you think that is?
And that's a good question. Data can tell us what's happening, but not necessarily why it happens. My own feeling, it's because Anglicans and Catholics and United Church, when they go to services more frequently, they're more apt to hear sermons, sharing, songs, and prayers about the needs around the world, and then be encouraged to go out and do something about it. It's what we used to call the social gospel. So they may go away from church and think, I've got to do something, and that something might include voting. For Catholics, it could be because they're hearing Catholic social teaching from the pulpit, or they're hearing exhortations from Pope Francis about prioritizing the needs of the poor and the marginalized.
I want to ask a question about Jews and Muslims. What did you find there?
That's also very interesting. In 2021, the study found that the Jewish vote was pretty evenly split between liberals and conservatives, with a slight advantage for the liberals. For Muslims, it was the opposite, however. 57% voted liberal and only 4% for the conservatives, while 23% went to the NDP. But the October 7 attack changed everything, as did the impact of the war in Gaza. A survey by Angus Reid in 2024 found that liberals' efforts to offer a balanced approach to the Israel-Gaza conflict cost them support from both Jews and Muslims. The end result is that Muslims are turning towards the NDP now, and Jews are showing much greater support for conservatives.
Obviously, religion is just one factor among many things, though, right?
Of course, yes. Gender, education, which part of the country you live in, etc. Also, someone who is religious in the city might vote differently from someone who's religious in the rural parts of Canada, even if they belong to the same denomination. And then there's the impact of social media, plus religious materials and influencers coming from the United States. But when it comes to this election, I think all bets are off. Traditional voting habits among religious people may well change, since it seems like the ballot question this time around is, who is the best person to stand up to Donald Trump? And there could be some switching this time around. So the next Statistics Canada study on religion and voting might be very interesting.
Thank you very much for coming in with all this data in the report today.
Thank you.